Hi, I'm Lelia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Today we're going to be talking about contentment. And contentment is not always easy. What's it mean? It means being satisfied. And that's fine as long as we're getting everything we want. But how do you stay content no matter what position you're in? No matter what's going on? We're going to talk about how to be content right where you are. And that means under any circumstance. So let's say, suppose, wow, if I had more money, I could do this, this, and this. Or if I had a better car or a newer car, if I had a better job. There's so many things, you always want more and more. What if you're in an apartment and you say, oh, if I had a bigger apartment or even a house? Well, we can't always be that kind of content, but we could put ourselves in the proper mindset to be content no matter what. So what if you're low on money, if you need a new car? But is your car working? Mine is. Not new, but I can get to the same point A to point B, without a car note, just like you can get there if you want that new car that you're going to have to pay for. And even being content right now, today, where I am, and I mean that literally, because even doing this, I'm always wondering, well, who's listening to me? Are my words helping somebody? Am I being encouraging? Am I talking about things that affect their lives? So even now, I'm still training myself to be content. Just knowing that I'm doing what I was assigned to do. Don't worry about how many people are listening. If I help one person, I will have satisfied my deed for the day. So now I'm training myself to be content right where I am as I speak to you. And that's why I always talk about obtaining wisdom and knowledge and understanding, because you got to have these things in order to make wise and responsible decisions. And we spoke about that. So we have to learn these things. And as we learn those things, this will bring us contentment. Contentment's a mindset. It's a choice. And we make choices every single day. Some of them are good and some not so good. So today we're going to be talking about how to get the contentment, but we're also going to be talking about some of the roadblocks that keep us from getting contentment. So we're going to be reading out of the book of Timothy. And we're going to start in 1 Timothy. And that's under the heading of the problems of unsound doctrine. Now, this is Paul the apostle. He's writing to his son, Timothy. Timothy was his son, and Paul is writing this letter to him. Paul's in jail. That's something to think about already. But yet he's content to write a letter to his son. So let's start in verse 3, because Paul is saying, as I besought thee, meaning as I asked you to stay in Ephesus, because Paul had to go to Macedonia. But he wanted Timothy to stay there and teach the doctrine, the proper, true doctrine. And what is a doctrine? A doctrine is teaching of statements. It's all the truth in here. And he wants his son Timothy to stay there and teach the people, that you might charge some of them to teach the doctrine as well, and no other doctrine. And he's saying in verse 4, he says, and don't give heed, that means don't pay attention. Don't give heed to fables and endless genealogies. Now, we all know what fables are, like fairy tales or stories, but actually they're saying fables are a fictitious statement, or the stories that people make up. They are fables. It's not a fact. And genealogies are accounts of descendants from generation to generation. This has been handed down. That's what they study. But he doesn't want them to get those confused with the real truth. It says, godly edifying, which is in faith. And edifying means uplifting instructions, giving the correct knowledge. And he wants him to teach the people so that they don't get mixed up with all the fables and what everybody else is telling them. And it says in verse 5, the end of the commandment is charity out of a pure heart. And charity is simply Christian love. It's generosity to others. It's you doing things for other people, and of a good conscience. And a conscience is your sense of morals, your conduct, how you treat others, and of faith unfeigned. So that unfeigned means, it means sincere. It means genuine. To feign something means to be fake, to make it up. So this is unfeigned faith. It's true and it's genuine and it's sincere. And it says in verse 6, because some having swerved have turned aside unto vain janglings. So that means those that were believing, they're listening to some of these fables and these fake things that the people are telling them. And now they're getting all conceited and inflated with their own selves. And you know what vain is. Vain janglings. And that to jangle means to ramble, to go on and on about nothing really. Nothing at all. It's just, they're just rambling on and you're listening and they're trying to persuade you to listen to what they're saying. Now let's go to chapter 2. This is a continuation. And it says it's a prayer and sobriety. And he's saying to his son still in this letter, he's saying, I exhort therefore, first of all, and to exhort means I strongly urge you. I urge you, Timothy, first of all, have supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving thanks to be made for all men. Supplications means to pray, to ask earnestly. When you're talking to God, you got to talk from your heart. It can't be just words. Oh, he'll know. He'll know. And it says prayers, that's your conversation with God. And intercessions. Well, intercessions is a prayer in favor of someone else. How many times do people say, oh, I don't know how to pray, or I've never prayed before? Well, you can be their intercessor. You pray for them. Many times. You pray for your family, you pray for your kids, you pray for health and strength, and that's where your conversation comes in. That's how you get to know God, his way of thinking, so you can learn how to think like that. All that's important. Then it says in verse 2, it says, for kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceful life in godliness and honesty. And godliness simply means devoutness. You're devoted to your beliefs. Your behavior is better because you're godly. You're following God's words, his laws, and you're being honest. And this is good and acceptable in the sight of God. God is our Savior, who will have all men be saved and to come unto the knowledge of truth. And we always say knowledge is what? The body of truth. And this book is definitely the body of truth. For there is only one God and one mediator between God and men. And that mediator is Jesus Christ, his Son. And who's the mediator? The mediator is the one who goes between two parties to reconcile for us. Because he, Jesus, gave himself as a ransom for all. And what's a ransom? It's to take up, you're paying the penalty. He paid the penalty for our sins. He was the one that was nailed to the cross, that we might be free from punishment. He paid the price with his life on the cross. And now we're going to go to, let's go to 2 Timothy, because there's something I wanted to do there. Let me go to 2 Timothy for a minute, and we're going to go to chapter 1 and start in verse 5. Because this, again, even though 2 Timothy is still the second letter that Paul wrote to his son Timothy while he was in jail, and he's appealing to Timothy for faithfulness. He's telling him, be faithful. Faithfulness in God. That's what he wants him to do. And he's saying how he calls to remembrance. We're in verse 5. I call to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in thee. So he's remembering, he's reminding Timothy, oh, I remember the unfeigned faith. That means the genuine and sincere faith that his son Timothy had. And he's saying it came down generation for generation, because it was first in thy grandmother Lois, and then in thy mother Eunice, and then in I. And I persuaded that in you as well. So he's saying generation to generation, this is how they learned, studied, and that's what he wants him to teach. And it says in verse 6, he says, I put you, meaning Timothy, in remembrance that thou shalt stir up the gift of God. Go around and talk about him. Get them stirred up about him, because it's in thee by the putting on of my hands. So he sent it down, handed it down to Timothy. And that's how that went from generation to generation. And his grandmother, his mother, his father, and now him. And that's what we have to learn to do. We have to learn to teach our children. We read this stuff, we've got to practice it. Children see, and that's what they follow. So if you're reading, just read something to them. Read a Bible story to them. That's how you teach your children. Now let's go back. I want to go back 1 second to 1 Timothy, but I want to do chapter 6. And I'm going to read from 6 to 9 because it is a continuation. Because right off in chapter 6, it says, godliness with contentment is a great gain. So once you trust God, godliness, you're devoted to Him. Once you get that spirit in you, that'll give you contentment. And that's what makes it such a wonderful gain. Your whole life will be different. Your whole life will be different. Okay, then it says, for we brought nothing into this world, and we surely will take nothing out. We're going to take nothing out. Then verse 8 says, and as having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. So what's he saying? As long as you got food on your table and clothes on your back, we should be content right where you are. If that's all you have, be content that you have that. Be grateful that you have it. It says, but verse 9 says, but there are they that will be rich, but they will fall into temptation and a snare. So the more the rich get, the more they want. But it doesn't do them any good because they go haywire. They fall into all kinds of temptations and things that are not of God nor good for them because they got everything. And then that puts them in a snare. So now they're caught up. And they get caught up into many foolish and hurtful lusts because one mistake could last you a lifetime. One indiscretion could ruin you for a lifetime. And it says they drown in destruction and perdition. Well, we know what destruction is. You're just totally wiped out. And perdition is eternal damnation. It's like, well, you're going to hell for real because you're doing everything. You're going to lose everything because of the way you're acting. So you've got to that's where the wisdom and the knowledge comes in, to know how to separate yourself from these people. That's very important. Now we're going to flip over to, let's go to the book of Philippians, I think. Philippians, we're going to look at chapter 4. And we're going to go from verse 11 to 13, I think. So let's go down to verse 11. And this is Paul again. He's talking to the Philippians as well. He writes to a lot of people while he's in prison. And that tells you something right there. He's still content. And he's in prison for no reason. Because of what he believes. They don't want him talking about that. So they throw him in prison. But it doesn't faze him because he's still writing, encouraging others to do what's right. So let's go Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. And we're going to go just through 11 and 13, I think. And it says, and he's telling them, it says, not that I speak in respect of want. I'm not saying I want anything. I'm just telling you, I have learned in whatsoever state I am, that I am therewith to be content. Now, if he can be content in jail, why can't you be content out of jail? All he gets is what they give him to eat. No new clothes, no change of clothes. He just sits there. Now, if he can be content in jail, why can't we be content out of jail? He says, I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things, I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, to abound and to need. He's been in every situation. Right now, he's in the need situation. He's in the abased situation, but he's still content. Why? Verse 13 says, because I can do all things with Christ who strengthens me. And look over at verse 19. What does that say? But my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory by Jesus Christ. So no matter what your situation is, you shouldn't have a problem. If he doesn't have a problem, why should you? Why should you? Okay, so now one more place I want to go is to Hebrews. I want to go to Hebrews, and we're going to look at chapter 13. And we're going to read through 5 and 6. And this is still telling us the same thing. Okay, let's go to verse 5. And it says, let your conversation be without covetousness. And covetousness means wanting what somebody else has. It could be stuff. It could be a position. It could be their other person. It could be a whole lot of things. But the point is, don't talk about, oh, I wish I had this. I wish I had that. That's being covetous. And we don't want to do that. And it says here, let your conversation be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For God has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. So that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. So you have no fear with God. He gives us strength and power. And verse 8 says, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. Yesterday, today, and forever. So everything we've read and spoken about is showing us how to be content right where we are. And Paul is a very good example of that, because if he could do it in prison, we can certainly do it at home. Now let's talk about some of those roadblocks I spoke of. Now let's think if you have a house, a small house or apartment, and you want a bigger house or move out of the apartment into a house, whatever the case may be. Bigger means what? It means more housework. So if you're not a good housekeeper, you don't want a bigger house, because that just makes more work for you. More running the vacuum, doing the floors, 2 bathrooms instead of 1. You got to think hard and long when you be careful what you ask for. Bigger also means more money. You got to spend more money. Your rent's going to go up, or you're getting a mortgage. Then you got to get homeowners insurance and renters insurance, and then your bills get higher. Your gas, your electric, your water, everything goes up. Now you've got maintenance upkeep, especially if you got a property. So bigger means more. Now, what about your car? Your car's too old, or I just want a new car. I've had it 10 years. I need a better one. Okay, here we go. What does better mean? Better means a car note. So if you don't have a car note, now you want a newer car, you might have to get a car note. I don't have a car note, and I'm satisfied with that. I'm satisfied right now where I am. I don't have no car note, and I'm not mad. Because my car can get me from point A to point B, just like yours, if you get a new one. And you have a car note, and I won't. And not only that, now your car insurance is going to go up, because you got to have full coverage because you got a car note. So you got more gas, bigger car, more gas money. That's what better means. Now, suppose you're dissatisfied with your job. You want a promotion. Maybe you taught somebody how to do something and they overlooked you and gave it to somebody else. And they got the better salary. But promotion also comes with a requirement. That means more responsibility. Maybe longer hours. You know, if people don't show up, you can't just run out the door because you're the manager or the supervisor. You got to stay and make sure things come out right. Suppose you have to be on call. All this stuff is relevant. All this stuff is relevant to wanting more and more and more. So, how about this? Maybe you just need a tighter budget. Do you have one? Or do you just spend your money? Well, I want this today. You got to learn the budget. Budget is important because if you learn to budget properly, how many things do you buy that you want rather than what you need? How much fast foods do you buy? How much money do you spend on just eating out because you don't feel like, oh, the kids want this, oh, I'll get them that. But think about it. The bottom line here is we're not nearly grateful enough for what we already have. We're bypassing. We're not even looking at what we have. You're still looking for more. Do you realize there's millions of people, not only in our country, but in countries all over the world that are starving, and they would give anything to have a quarter of what we have. A quarter. Life is like the weather, let's say. There's spring and there's summer and there's fall and there's winter. And in each season, what do? You adjust. You don't try to change it. You know you can't change the season. So if it's winter, you put your coat and your boots and all your stuff on. And if it's summer, you take it all off. But you're content at that time. And life is the same way. It's just that you've got to learn within yourself. I don't need that. I want it, but I don't need it. I don't need that because I can do without it. Like me with my car, I'm happy. I was so glad to get rid of that car note. Then I could change my insurance to whatever I wanted. I don't have to have full coverage. I just ride and I'm happy. I'm content where I am. And that's what we have to learn how to do. And contentment also means nobody shouldn't have to tell you, oh, come on, cheer up. It'll get better. Nobody has to tell you to be happy. Contentment means you can be happy by yourself. I don't mean by yourself, literally. I mean, you like other people around. You like to have family and friends and all that. But the point I'm making is when things aren't going your way, you've got to learn how to accept. Now, you may be going to get it. Maybe it's just not your time yet. Maybe you're not prepared for what you really want. And maybe what you really want isn't what you really need or isn't really what's good for you. And you've got to learn to remove from your life what isn't beneficial and keep. You got to know what to learn what to keep and what not to keep. And that's all of us. And we go through these changes because different seasons bring different people and different things into our lives. And you've got to recognize the good things that God has already given you. Just sit and look. I got a roof over my head. I got a car that's paid for. I got food. I got clothes. And I'm halfway healthy. So many people, if they could just have half the health that we have, they would be ecstatic. Be grateful for the things that God has given you. Recognize the things that God has given you. Don't be angry and frustrated and worrisome about stuff that really isn't that important. Contentment makes you free of all that because now you don't have to worry about anything because you're satisfied right where you are. And that's the whole point of all this that we've discussed today. So think about it. What are the things that you got that you take for granted? Name 5 things to yourself that you are really grateful for today. I can tell you right off the bat, we already discussed it. And health is very important. The safety of your children, a healthy family. You've got food, you've got your job, whether you like it or not. It's still your income. It's keeping that roof over your head. Forget the negative thoughts. That helps you get rid of your negativity. Nobody can give you what you need because nobody knows what you need. God's the only one who knows what we need, and he's the only one who's got it to give. That's why you have to keep talking to God on a daily basis. Let him know your heart. Let him know you need his help every single day. And my closing words for today are, everything begins and ends with God. Until next week, I'm Leolia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.